Please come. And I would like also to invite Michael March, who is going to discuss with Peter.
Just a few questions before the meet. You grew up, well, you were born in Santa Monica, California. You came back to Europe. You came back to California to study film. So what's really the different textures between film and literature?
The differences are endless and enormous, but I do think, for my personal life or work, that writing film, making film, writing prose have become a family. Maybe not a happy family, but one that interacts and that is fruitful to one another. I have learned a lot from my film side, and I hope that my literature does mirror some of that force, and the other way round. So they are fruitful to each other, but the textures are absolutely different, like but man and woman.
The audiences are different? There's the visible world, the invisible world.
Although I think in my writing I have found, although I don't want to interpret too much, but I have found that some of my writing is almost like film in a certain way, that you see images when you read. I mean, that's true of many books that we love, but I have seen that happen to my work, and it surprises me sometimes.
The films that you've made, which film is closest to your written work?
Oh, but Michael, please don't misunderstand. My film making is documentaries. So a documentary film is another part of the family altogether. I've written screenplays, yes, but as it is in the film world, these screenplays have not yet been on the screen. I mean, they exist, but they have not been made into movies. So documentaries is of course another world in its own.
You like Hollywood?
I do. I studied film there, and I had a wonderful time studying film in Hollywood, with all the shadows that I see in American filmmaking. It's still the type of filmmaking I feel most attracted to. I live in France since 18 years, and I have very great difficulties with French films, for instance.
Why is that?
I get very bored.
They smoke too much?
I think they've stopped smoking so much, but I'm very often bored. There's too much talk, there's too much dialogue. I'm not a great fan of too much dialogue. I mean, not us now, but...
We have no dialogue.
Pardon me?
No, we're friends. We're friends.
That's
We don't need
true.
a dialogue. The question of friendship and family is very close to you. Very, very, very close to you. That why is that? You talked about your home in ways in the book. That's a very sacred concept. Why do you feel so much at home in a book, or writing is very important for you?
Probably because my home situation was always so fleeting or so insecure. I remember, or I've been told, I don't really remember, that the first 5 years of my life were already living in 4 different cities. My parents left Los Angeles to live in Paris.
But you had a nipple in your mouth. How would you see it?
But I lived in London, I lived in Munich, I lived in Paris. We tried a small village near Salzburg. And then finally they decided when I was 5 to move to Vienna. But the first years were already so insecure.
But you remember those years? In other words, you felt those years? They're inside you?
Yes,
you've seen these years?
They're part of the blood circulation, of course.
What did you see?
I'm absolutely certain that every person remembers the first 3 years of his or her life, even if the images aren't there, but they're in the bones, they're in the cells, they're there, you live with them, they make you, they're you. So I was born into a chaotic life, which I like to a certain extent. I don't suffer from it. But since it's always so insecure, or has been, I found a tent somewhere else. And the tent has always been a very small room in which I was at least trying to write.
What was the first knowledge of language, the remembrance of language? Which language was this?
I do believe that it was German, because my parents were both emigres from Germany, my father and mother from Austria, and they spoke German to me as a baby. But I do also remember that the first street language, of course, when I was a little child, was English. So it was the two at the same time, but the language of the parents comes closer, of course. And that's why I write in German, I assume.
Don't get me wrong, Peter.
We'll see.
But most of your books, except for the book on Jerusalem, are fiction. Am I right?
I don't want to give away the secret, but I would say most of my books are not really fully fiction.
They're not?
Not fully fiction.
They're not fiction.
No.
Well,
Except the biography of Franz Werfel, which of course I was really very, very serious about being truthful. At the same time, to write someone else's biography is a fascinating task, but you are bound to make mistakes. And I still fear that one day somebody will say, how could you have possibly said that? There is proof that you were wrong. But the book came out 20 years ago, actually, in 1987. Nobody has come up to me to give me a bad time.
Since we're in Prague...
But I was very precise in the Werfel, I think.
You were in Prague. When did you first come to Prague?
That's a strange story. I always felt very close to Prague because my father's father is buried here in Olszany, in Strasznice. I visited the grave yesterday. I feel very strongly about Prague and always did, and came here in the 60s for the first time. But strangely enough, when I did my research for the Werfel book, I was not allowed to travel to Prague because I had written a reportage for Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung about the Jewish community in Prague. And I hurt somebody's feelings, or several people's feelings in high places. And for 6 or 7 years I was not allowed to come.
What did you say? You're very sweet.
That's a mask, that's a game, that's a trick. I hope that I'm not just sweet, no. I said, and I think I was right at the time, that the way the Czech communist government dealt with the Jewish community had certain similarities with what the Nazis had planned, which was to make them part of a museum, that the Jewish community in Prague, not just because of the synagogues that were used as museums, but that it was more or less a dying race, or the Nazis had planned a museum of the dying race here in Prague. And I did, without saying it very clearly, make certain bridges between what was then and what was in the 70s, in the 80s, what I saw. And it was a bit too much, although I still believe that I was right to a certain degree. And I then came back once, and there was a very, very nice lady who met me by a mere coincidence. I forgot her name. I've looked all over in memory, but I can't find her name, and I flirted with her, and it turned out that she was an agent, but I found out much, much later. But I didn't have an affair. I was only flirting. What was her name?
I would
Is
say
she,
something.
maybe she's here.
Maybe she's in whoever's listening through this book. Whose notebook is that, by the way?
I actually brought this because the
Why?
translation of my latest book is not yet in print, and I changed a lot of things today because the translator made a lot of mistakes. It's a translation in progress. And when I looked at what we're doing, what I'm reading today, I found passages that I just disliked.
The translator is the agent.
The translator is a traitor, not a trader.
Traitor. One other question, which you've answered, is that I would say that your fiction, your true fiction, part of it is non-fiction, and part of it's fiction. Which part is fiction and which is part non-fiction?
That's a question that is very true, for instance, for a novel I wrote about the life of Walt Disney. The strangest stories of his life sound completely invented, like it can't be. And parts of what I invented sound completely natural and make total sense. Like I have a meeting between Disney and Andy Warhol in the book shortly before Disney dies. Never ever happened, but it reads like a completely
It's my favorite part.
non-fictional part. And some stories, like his mad anti-Semitism, anti-blackism, racism, sound like it can't be, but they happened.
His affair with Mickey Mouse.
No, I was very, very fascinated by the character. I grew up knowing about him because a friend of my father's had worked for him and presented him to me as a half-god. So I always knew about him, always heard about him, but then much later in life I found out about the real person, and I was very fascinated. And that he didn't draw a single line, that he had 1,000 drawing soldiers who did everything for him. But still, he was the force behind it, and that's quite fascinating.
It's a very fine book called, in
English?
German, The King of America, in English, The Perfect American.
Thank you. But that's one of the lesser autobiographical books, I must admit.
We were going to present that this evening until Peter changed his mind. His prerogative to do so. And what you're going to hear is from his latest book, which was published in German. It's called Crossing the Hudson. It will come out in English. Why did you change this after we had labored to present?
Yes, I agree. We did
Disney,
labor.
Andy Warhol.
I changed it for the very obvious reason that the Disney text has no link to Dada.
That is the perfect example.
And I thought it would be
That is why we're here.
It would be terribly un-Dada not to change the program. So
please read about the book. Well, tell us about the book and read the book backwards.
I'll try my best. No, but I would also say that from the subject matter, as you will hear, the 15 minutes reading that I will do, that it's more related to what we have spoken here, to what we have heard, to a certain lawlessness in many ways. I just thought it was more appropriate. Just very short, I don't want to do too much of an introduction. It's the story of a 45-year-old fur dealer from Vienna who was born in America and who is the only child of very strong parents. A very strong father who is a known scientist, and a very strong mother who you will meet. The father has passed away 11 months before, and the son comes to New York to visit his mother who lives in New York, and she's picked him up from the airport to go with him to the country house, which he has since a few years. Although he has financial worries, he has a country house. And she's in the car with him. They thought it would take about 2 hours the most to get there. But when they reach a very, very large bridge that crosses the River Hudson, they're stuck in a traffic jam. And I'll start reading there. Unfortunately, I have to go to the bathroom, he heard Mother say. Me too. Now that won't help me much, will it? Mom, we'll just have to wait until we get to the other side. That may take an hour at this rate. I certainly can't wait that long. The oncoming lanes were strangely empty and looked like they'd been stripped to the bone. The bulldozers had halted their work. Since the two directions were separated from each other by concrete barriers, you couldn't pull out and turn back. Behind them, traffic was piling up steadily, which meant there was no chance of turning around at the west end of the bridge either. Hundreds were stuck. Perhaps as many as 1,000 cars were now at a standstill. At 4 p.m., the local radio station, WSDN in Tarrytown on the east side of the river, reported that traffic on the Tappan Zee Bridge was badly congested in both directions. The cause of the backup was not yet known, but their traffic report would be constantly updated. Stop fiddling with the radio and leave it on that station, Mother ordered. Gustav sensed Father's presence around him. He didn't just see Ludwig's feet and toes before his mind. He saw his ankles too, with their thin blue veins, saw his shins, his legs with gray and white hairs on their pale skin, his naked legs up to his knees. I see your kneecaps, Father, Gustav thought, and I see down to your brittle bones, right down to the marrow. A penny for your thought, Rosa Rubin said to her son. I was thinking of Father's legs. How strange that you should say that. Just this minute I was seeing Papa's feet, his shins, and both legs up to his knees. A shiver ran across Gustav's shoulders and down his back. And now, she asked, what are you thinking about now? Now I see him lying there naked, like a corpse ready to be washed. Me too, I see him clearly, but a few seconds before you said it. He put the car in neutral, set the parking brake, looked at Mother, and she looked at him. All around them, people were getting out of their cars, shouting words of encouragement to each other. It was much too hot to stay inside the car very long with the air conditioning turned off. People were now sitting on the hoods, heated by the sun and the motors. Gustav opened the heavy door on his side. Where are you going? Mother asked. Nowhere. He slowly walked to the edge of the bridge. Aggressive honking could be heard from all over now, and people were crying out, screaming, enough of this, come on, let's get it going, what the hell is this, damn it, what the fuck is going on? He stood at the bridge railing, looking south, down at the river, when the Tappan Zee Bridge was built in 1955, one of the widest places in the entire 350 miles length of the Hudson River was chosen. At the time, there were rumors that payoffs had been involved in getting it constructed in this particular place. I mean, it's a bridge that's almost 5 kilometers long, non-fiction information. Here, as on every large bridge, Gustav had the feeling of being transported into a floating, dreamlike state. Since his earliest childhood, he had experienced the crossing of mighty bridges as the form of movement closest to flying. All bridges, those in his hometowns of New York, Los Angeles, and Vienna, those he encountered while traveling or found reproduced in books, magazines, or private photos, those he stood on and those he saw only from a distance, they all caused a slight quickening of his pulse, grounded him in the here and now, while giving him a foreboding of ineffable, intangible realms. His paternal grandfather, whom he had not known, he died 18 years before Gustav's birth, suffered from gephirophobia, the fear of bridges and crossing bridges. In Prague, where Theodor Rubin grew up and spent half of his brief life, it was a daring undertaking and cost him great nervous exertion to cross the Charles Bridge. Whether he was in foreign cities or taking a trip by train or driving across a bridge in a car, he began to tremble, broke into a sweat, and was fearful for the seconds or the minutes it took him to reach the other side. He mostly stayed on the Mala Strana, where his house was, and avoided the other half of the city, the other side of the Vltava. Vltava. On every bridge, whether it was only a few yards or several miles long, Gustav felt his boyhood urge to throw a piece of wood into the stream on one side of the bridge and then run over to the other to watch it come shooting out and continue its journey, struggling to keep itself above water. And for as long as they could, they would watch the fantasy ship floating away, father and son, then immediately start looking for another branch, or they would construct a boat of folded newspaper, drop it in, and repeat the process again and again. Whenever they set foot on a bridge together, they automatically began searching for a piece of wood, a plastic bottle, or a piece of cardboard they could christen an ocean liner, and that went on as long as father lived. At 40, Gustav played the bridge game with his son Amadei, and with the same yearning he had felt at 4 and at 14. Leaning over the railing of the Tappan Zee, Gustav looked down at the waters of the Hudson, violently breaking against the piers on the north side of the bridge, out of his sight, before they emerged, churned up on the south side, and rushed on toward New York City. And then, only then he noticed it for the first time. He saw it as clearly as he saw the dense jam of cars all around him, the trucks, the buses, motorcycles, and sailboats, the motorboats on trailers, the overweight men in their baseball caps, and the ever-growing number of children getting out of their cars. Down there, in the river, directly beneath and parallel to the Tappan Zee Bridge, lay the gargantuan, naked body of his father. Directly under him, at the western end of the bridge, the waters of the Hudson were washing over father's feet in foaming waves. They lay as if anchored to one of the concrete expanses sticking out into the river at right angles to the piers. Father's head, however, lay more than a mile away at the eastern end of the bridge, in shallower waters near the left bank of the Hudson. In between, father's legs, buttocks, and crotch, his slightly bloated belly, his arms and his chest with the 3 nipples. Beneath his right nipple he had a third, somewhat smaller one. Gustav had a tiny one in exactly the same place, reassuring him as he was growing up that he wasn't an adopted child. You couldn't see it clearly, the little nipple, from the distance, only guess that it was there from where Gustav was standing. How could he be sure that it was his father, that figure down there, resting stretched out on its left side, the side of the heart, and gigantically large? He perceived shoulders in the distance, guessed neck, goiter, chin, one cheek, thought he could spy a closed eye, saw a furrowed brow, a shock of thick white hair. The giant rested on its arm, pelvis, and thigh, motionless but not lifeless, passed away but not dead. Not a single sign of decomposition anywhere. Every wrinkle, every vein, the texture of the skin, the color of the hair, everything just as it had been when he was alive. No doubt about it, it was the father body, lying there like Gulliver, stranded in Lilliput, the father he had idolized, his best friend, his big brother, the father animal that seemed to him immortal. Ludwig Rubin, who had assured him at regular intervals since he was a little boy, "You'll see, Gustav, my boychik, I'm going to live to be 120, you'll see." He couldn't get enough of this sight and now felt his scalp prickle, stared long minutes down at the giant body of his father, suspended over the water on the footings of the piers. Down below, a further proof he no longer needed by now, the big toe, with the yellowish, brownish, blackish nail, thick, misshapen, wide as a rock, and quite clearly visible. Father, dear father, such a tender, dear, affectionate, and gentle person as you, provided you weren't having one of your raging temper tantrums that turned you into a monster. Your small, compact body, a bit pudgy even, stretched out over a mile or more. Can you hear me? Can you feel me near? I must hurry way up there to your head, Father. I want to see if your eyes are open, but I can't leave here right now. Mother's waiting for me. Forgive me, please have patience. I'll get up there to your forehead, your lips, your skull, as soon as I can, as quickly as I ever can, I promise. He returned to the car. Mother must be told not a word. The incomprehensible had to remain Gustav's innermost secret. I can't believe you left me here all by myself for so long. Sorry, I suddenly felt a little strange. You don't have to tell me, sweetie. I know all about it. If my bladder weren't so full, I'd take a look at it right now. I just can't at the moment. What are you talking about? You are trespassing into the twilight zone, grasping at ghosts. He stared at her. There was no way she could know what he had just seen. He's lying under the bridge, she whispered, naked, stretched out on his back or maybe on his side, the way he sleeps in bed. Mom, you're hallucinating. First of all, don't lie to me. Second of all, find me some place to go to pee right away. And thirdly, they said on the radio, a huge truck had tripped over on its side and was blocking all the lanes far up ahead on the eastern end. This may take a very long time. We should call M. It's Madeleine, or Mad. Her name isn't M. Whatever her name is. I need a bathroom. Thank you.
Peter Stephan Jungk. Peter, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is one for you. Následuje přestávka, řekněme 20-minutová. 10, pouze 10.
Když mi to tady